Okay, welcome to the top 10 at 10. Today is May the 29th, 2014, and these are the top 10 stories. Oop. It's from the New York Times editorial, yesterday's. President Obama misses a chance on foreign affairs. President Obama and his aides heralded his commencement speech at the United States Military Academy at West Point on Wednesday as a big moment when he would lay out his foreign policy vision for the remainder of his term and refute his critics. The address did not match the hype, was largely uninspiring, lacked strategic sweep, and is unlikely to quiet his detractors on the right or the left. Probably. That's probably true no matter what he said, but yeah. Mr. Obama did make a strong case on the use of force, understandably frustrated by critics who think military intervention is the only way for America to avoid looking weak, unquote. Mr. Obama was steady and sensible on this vital issue. He endorsed military action, even unilaterally, when the country is threatened or when the security of its allies is in danger, but he stressed correctly that not every problem has a military solution, and warned that some of our most costly mistakes came not from restraint, but from our willingness to rush into military adventures. He was right, for instance, to call off the threat of action against President Bashar al-Assad of Syria, agreed to surrender his chemical weapons. In his speech, Mr. Obama tried to push back against critics who say he has ceded America's post-World War II dominance. The question, as he correctly puts it, is not whether America will lead, but how we will lead. He reasserted that isolationism is not an option. Not that anyone was saying that. But he provided little new insight into how he plans to lead into the next 2 years, and many still doubt that he fully appreciates the leverage the United States has even in the changing world, falling back on the hackneyed phrases like America is the indispensable nation told us little. The president said he wanted to spend $5 billion to train and support armies in places like Libya, Mali, Yemen, and Somalia to combat terrorists. The aim is to avoid having to use American troops, and in theory it makes sense, but the United States has a checkered history in such endeavors, and Mr. Obama made only a cursory mention of other factors crucial to success, including responsible governance and education for all. It was disturbing to hear him gloss over the return of military rule in Egypt. Embarrassing. Obama's talk of the need for more transparency about drone strikes and intelligence gathering, including abusive surveillance practices, was ludicrous. His administration had to be dragged into even minimal disclosures on both topics. Just Tuesday, the administration said it wanted to make further deletions from the legal memo on drone strikes that a court ordered it to make public. Mr. Obama's comments on China and Russia barely touched on how he plans to manage two major countries that have turned increasingly aggressive, pledging anew to close the jail at Guantanamo, God, again, which Congress has blocked at this point, little more than a reassuring gesture. This was far from Mr. Obama's big moment, but since he has no office left to run for, what matters ultimately is his record in the next 2.5 years. Yeah, that's I think a pretty fair assessment. Story number 9. Piketty in one graph. This is from the Center for Economics and Policy Research. This graphic summarizes the key inequality and policy trends traced in Thomas Piketty's Capital for the 21st Century. So let's see here. Top marginal income tax rate, top 1% share. So as can clearly be seen in the if you look at the red versus the blue line, the as the top marginal income tax rate went down, the top 1% share of the economy went up. Or you could look at it, I mean, depending on your interpretation, you could say as the top 1% gained more in income, they were able to use their political power to drop the top marginal tax rate. I guess that's a chicken and the egg argument, but there's a lot of interesting things in Piketty's book to go over, but this is definitely one of them. The sort of inverse relationship almost between the top marginal tax rate and how much share of the economy the top 1% is getting. Story number 8. the coming explosion over climate change. In a speech last night, embattled Senator Kay Hagan blasted GOP challenger Tom Tillis over his climate denialism, arguing that North Carolina needs a senator who believes climate change exists. Hagan added, unlike my opponent who flatly denied the existence of climate change, I know the EPA's ability to responsibly regulate greenhouse gas emissions is key to protecting our environment for future generations. However, Hagan also called on the EPA to delay the introduction of pending new rules on carbon emissions from existing coal-fired plants, which are, by the way, due out in June the 2nd, so in a week or so. The two moves aren't necessarily contradictory, and it's also the latest sign that climate change could actually be something of an issue in this year's campaign. The climate, it will not be a central issue in Senate races, but the topic will probably get more attention than usual. That's certainly sure. I mean, Tom Steyer's dumping into some serious money, $100 million. There it is. This is, I think, a legit issue. Dems will likely point to the Koch brothers when the next big climate change-related policy issue flares up. Those new EPA rules, even as the Koch spend tens of millions of dollars to transfer the Senate to Republicans with the explicit goal of persuading Americans that the answer to their economic problems is fewer government regulations. And that leads to story number 7. Chamber study predicts Obama climate rule will kill jobs. This is from Bloomberg. The nation's biggest business lobby says President Obama's plan to tackle climate change could cost the U.S. economy $50 billion a year. Supporters predict it will create jobs and lower power bills. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the National Resources Defense Council are both releasing economic impact studies over the president's plan will be fought over dollars and cents. For Obama, the risk is the plan gets labeled a job killer, just as the campaigns heat up for the election for the U.S. Senate. In analysis today, days before the EPA unveils a proposal to cut carbon dioxide emissions from power plants, the chamber said that an ambitious pollution control effort could force more than a third of the coal-fired capacity to close by 2030, resulting in economic losses of $50 billion a year and the elimination of 224,000 jobs. Oh boy, that's not good. Story number 6, President said to be planning to use executive authority on carbon rule. So New York Times, President Obama will use his executive authority to cut carbon emissions from the nation's coal-fired plants by up to 20%, according to people familiar with his plans, and will force industry to pay for the pollution it creates through cap-and-trade programs across the country. Mr. Obama will unveil his plans in a new regulation written by the EPA at the White House on Monday. It would be the strongest action ever taken by a president. Well, so Monday they're saying this is going to happen. Cutting carbon emissions by 20%, a substantial amount, will be the most important step in the administration's pledge goal to reduce pollution over the next 6 years and could eventually shut down hundreds of coal-fired power plants across the country. The regulation would have far more impact on the environment than the Keystone Pipeline, which many administration officials considered a political sideshow. And is certain to be met with opposition from Republicans who say Mr. Obama will be using his executive authority as a backdoor to force through an inflammatory cap-and-trade policy he could not get through Congress. Yep. So that fight's coming. Looks like climate change is going to be a serious fight finally. Story number 5. The military is building brain chips to treat PTSD. How well can you predict your next mood swing? How well can anyone? It's an existential dilemma for many of us, but for the military, the ability to treat anxiety, depression, and memory loss and the symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder has become one of the most important battles of the post-World War period. Now the Pentagon is developing a new, innovative brain chip to treat PTSD in soldiers and veterans that could bring sweeping new changes to the way depression and anxiety is treated for millions of Americans. With $12 million and the potential for $26 million more if benchmarks are met, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, wants to reach deep into your brain's soft tissue to record, predict, and possibly treat anxiety, depression, and other maladies of mood and mind. Teams from the University of California at San Francisco, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and Medtronic will use the money to create a cybernetic implant with electrodes extending into the brain. The military hopes to have a prototype within 5 years and then plans to seek FDA approval. DARPA's System-Based Neurotechnology for Emerging Therapies, or SUBNETS, program draws from almost a decade of research in treating disorders such as Parkinson's disease via a technique called deep brain stimulation. Low doses of electricity are sent deep into the brain in somewhat the same way that a defibrillator sends electricity to jumpstart a heart after cardiac arrest. While it sounds high-tech, it's a crude example of what's possible with future brain-machine interaction and cybernetic implants in the decades ahead. About to step into some sci-fi stuff, my friends. How about that? So apparently this is a treatment for PTSD. They'll put a chip in the soldier's head and I guess stimulate. Obviously, I have no expertise in this, but I guess stimulate areas to prevent damage or a lack of some places going dark, to increase mood or to prevent mood swings, negative mood swings. So that should be interesting to watch. Story number 3. Google releases workforce demographics, vows to increase diversity. From Reuters, Google Incorporated revealed the gender and racial makeup of its 50,000 strong workforce on Wednesday, disclosing a significant below average proportion of minorities and women employees that it said was, quote, miles from where we want to be, unquote. Google's disclosure of its workforce demographics represented a rare move for a U.S. company, even if the figures came as no surprise to those familiar with Silicon Valley, an industry long scrutinized for its lack of diversity. Blacks and Hispanics made up just 2 and 3% of overall employees at Google. Jeez, 2 to 3%, respectively. Okay, so 2% black, 3% Hispanic. While women accounted for 30%, the company said in a detailed blog post. That compares with the U.S. workforce average of about 47% women in 2012. According to the Department of Labor, for blacks and people of Hispanic descent, it was 12 and 16%, respectively. Well, put simply, Google is not where we want to be when it comes to diversity, and it's hard to address these kinds of challenges if you're not prepared to discuss them openly and with the facts, Laszlo Bach, Senior Vice President of People Operations, said in a Wednesday blog post. So, Silicon Valley, run by rich white guys, many of whom are douches. Story number 2, John Boehner's friends plot Tea Party crackdown on Politico. They've given John Boehner constant headaches during his 3 years as Speaker. Now Boehner's friends are trying to make sure that a small pocket of Tea Party-aligned Republicans won't have a chance to derail his speakership next year, and if they try, they could be punished. A group of his closest allies, including fellow Ohio Republicans Pat Tiberi, are discussing tactics such as trying to change the GOP conference rules to punish members who do not support the party's nominee during a floor vote. A lawmaker who bucks the Republicans' choice for Speaker could lose committee assignments, or worse. Boehner's allies have already stripped some Republicans of their committee assignments for straying too far from the team. In a sign of force, some of Boehner's friends are considering releasing a letter with the names of several dozen GOP lawmakers pledging to vote for no one else besides the Speaker, making the election of a more conservative rival logistically impossible. The effort is playing out amid ongoing speculation that Boehner may retire soon after the midterms, though the Ohio Republican insists he will stick around. And the number 1 story, this is the major news event last night. Edward Snowden gives primetime interview defending whistleblowing. Last night, an interview with NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, conducted by NBC News anchor Brian Williams, aired in primetime on NBC. In the hour-long broadcast, Snowden addressed questions ranging from the details of NSA programs being used against Americans, being trapped in Russia, and why he felt the duty to blow the whistle on the NSA's controversial activities. Even for those following the details of Snowden's case from the beginning, there was news such as NBC News' confirmation of at least one email sent by Snowden to NSA legal officials, noting his concerns that the programs he was exposed to were unconstitutional. That revelation bolsters the case that Snowden was a whistleblower who had attempted to go through proper channels before contacting journalists to blow the whistle. Also discussed were the extensive technological capabilities of the NSA using a phone Williams Williams had brought to the interview as an example, Snowden demonstrated how minor pieces of information gleaned from hacking the phone, such as searching for a sports score, could reveal vast amounts of personal information about Williams and his, quote, pattern of life, unquote, information that could be construed and used by government analysts in a variety of ways. Besides Snowden's work at the NSA and the agency's wide-ranging technological powers, the interview delved into the ethics and efficacy of the post-9/11 security state, both whether total collection of information or building a bigger haystack, unquote, really works, and whether the system violates the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and Americans' privacy. Snowden argued affirmatively in both cases that the NSA surveillance system does not work, as evidenced by the Boston Marathon bombing, and that the NSA's collection program violated the Fourth Amendment's provision on prohibiting general warrants for search and seizure, and that the NSA seizes personal information without specific warrants. Whether or not the interview will affect Edward Snowden's legal case with the U.S. government is hard to say, but it certainly offered the wider American public a chance to see him up close and hear his side of the story. And that is the top 10 at 10. The story you'd like me to feature on the top 10 at 10, please tweet me at DanSWright. Be sure to read all the stories at firedoglake.com. Thanks for watching. See you later.